first patient came in, a very sick gentleman who had, we'd put him on high flow oxygen, more than 15 liters per minute, and his oxygen level was very low. He'd been transferred from, I believe it was Central Region, and it was the first time we'd read about this watched on TV in other countries, but then it was my turn to take care of him. So the first thing I did was to put on this spacesuit for the very first time, and within 5 minutes, I was sweating like a pig, and from that moment, we sort of made a decision. We're not going to use that. We're going to use the normal surgical gown with as many measures as possible to keep ourselves safe, and then we picked up from there. This particular patient did well, and we were quick to, adopt some protocols from the West that enabled most of our patients who had moderate and even severe COVID to go home. But then there's a certain set of patients, it's not a majority, it's a minority, that no matter how much oxygen you give, no matter this medication, the oxygen in the lungs keep going down. And that particular category has been extremely difficult and extremely painful. This is a group that would end up being put to sleep on a ventilator. And I must say that many families, many healthcare workers have borne significant emotional strain just dealing with COVID-19. I remember I used to think that I'm an exceptional doctor, and actually I am in critical care. The truth is I'm very good at that. But the days when COVID made me doubt whether there's value in what I was doing, because for those who, not get me wrong, actually more than 95% of our patients will do well, because many of them will not end up being on ventilator. You can do some things to stop that. But then when you have to put you on ventilator, put you to sleep with a tube in, then the outcomes across the world are extremely difficult. And you do a CT scan for these patients, and you see there's basically no lung. Every place is white. You're even wondering how the patient is alive at that particular time. And your heart sinks, because some of these are very young people, very energetic, and they look at you with hope. And you dealt with probably now, I think when a year passed, I dealt with more than 100 critical care cases of COVID. And you don't know where to start, because it looks difficult, and you know what that cost looks like. It's been very sad to see one of the big risk factors for COVID-19 is pregnancy. So for severe COVID and death is pregnancy. So seeing a very young mom who just delivered very recently, they have no comorbid, no diabetes, no hypertension ever. They're not obese, they're young. And when you do a CT scan, your heart sinks, because the CT scan, the heart is completely white. And you hear the conversations between the husband and the wife tells the husband, love, I know you'll have to do this alone. Be a good dad. The way I'm feeling, she's right, and she didn't make it. That's life, and so we take it as it is, and be the best we can every day. Of course, we had some very nice cases to celebrate. Patients who would come out. I remember lived from Nakuru, a very young mom, a young family. Her lungs looked terrible. She was on ventilator, and as she was coming out, the joy is tremendous. Another lady recently came back, and she was narrating to us a literal near-death experience, where she actually tells us she felt she crossed over to the other side, and she could see the people who had gone long before, and they carried her back. And I know she'll be doing a story recently soon. But those kinds of stories for those on vent were a little bit far between, and it was a difficult season. I was definitely scared, because, and in fact, I discussed with my wife very early on when COVID started. We had a discussion that I feel I need to move out of the house and go and stay near the hospital, because one of the difficulties in COVID, and you'll hear about this across the world, at the point of putting a patient in the machine, it's very hard. There are very few doctors who are skilled enough to make that happen, and I know that I invented a technique that would allow that process to be very smooth, and I felt confident that I'm able to contribute in that way. Unfortunately, I need to be able to. There are things I can delegate that I'm not able to, because skill is something you acquire over time. And I realized I can't get out of it. So I wanted to get one room house to stay in, because I knew I was not immune. Neither was my wife, neither was my wife would hear none of it. Angel, she'd hear none of it. She said, whatever happens, you're going to be in this together. And yes, I was afraid, but I also felt very early on that given the way COVID spreads, the spacesuit would not necessarily be When I mean by specs, I mean the PPE, the coverall that people are wearing, would not really change the transmissibility of this particular virus, not like Ebola. And also, immediately when I was busy sweating and my glasses are fogging, I could see nothing. I'm working at maybe 30-40%, and therefore I didn't see the benefit in that. I know that many centers adopted what we call remote control care for these patients, where you see the patient through a window, and across the world it's known that kind of medicine is suboptimal. And in my time as in critical care, I know that the sicker patients need more direct and immediate care. And so it was a tough decision, probably a little bit reckless looking back, but I don't think I could make a decision different from that, because you have to be there. I know very early on the instruction to healthcare workers was do not resuscitate a COVID 19 patient. But I was wondering, how do you do that? You know, a patient has just been brought in, they've come into your outpatient, they are almost stopping breathing. I mean, either they stop breathing or they're about to stop breathing. You want to take 3 minutes or 4 minutes to put on your PPE. By the time you're done, you'll have a cough. So really, it wasn't practical. And yes, it was dangerous, but thank God, here we are. Of course, the numbers of, can I say, non-believers keeps shrinking.
Yes.
But even today,
Oh, there's
there are people who feel there's no COVID.
How does that make you feel as a patient, especially?
Quite distressed, because the truth is, the people who are struggling for their lives, especially very early on in ICU, were very disciplined and very, people who take precautions, elderly people, and people who, in general, were careful. And I know, there was this perception that the person who had very severe COVID was one who was COVID. Then now, at that moment, you see the family coming around them and asking, how do I take care of myself? But in fact, what used to happen in reality was the middle-aged people, the younger people, were actually the ones who got COVID from parties, from carelessness in other places. Then they go and see the parents, and they go and see people in the villages and give them COVID. And now these people come to ICU because of age, because of other conditions, and they're struggling for their lives. Now, when you had been affected, then you know COVID exists. But just outside of that circle, there are other young people who are getting COVID every day, not knowing because their COVID was very mild. It felt more like a cold for them, and they didn't even get tested. And so they were very confident that COVID doesn't exist. Of course, it's extremely sad. I know we had very many arguments with some people around it, but I'm glad that over time, people have come to understand and appreciate that COVID is real. Now I'm telling you, as a doctor who's been in ICU dealing with COVID, that it is real. And yes, the number that suffers severe COVID is very small. It's about a small percentage, about 7%. But 7% of a million people, that is a big number of people, 70,000 actually. And we have 40 million, almost 50 million in the country. So let us be very careful about it.